Marcos Bellwether slammed his phone screen dark with a brusque gesture. 0 messages, 0 missed calls. The clock read 8 in the evening, and the man who controlled half of Midtown Manhattan's most exclusive skyscrapers realized a devastating truth. Today was his 35th birthday, and the world didn't care at all. His office on the 50th floor was in complete silence. Through the immense glass panes, New York City sparkled at his feet, but inside his chest, there was only a frozen void. He had sacrificed everything to reach the top. He had crushed his competitors, multiplied his fortune, and in the process, had let go of the only person who had ever looked him in the eyes, and not at his wallet. The wooden door burst open, shattering the silence. Samantha, his fiancée, entered. Designer shoes that cost as much as a compact car, a limited edition handbag, and an expression of absolute irritation. She didn't even look at his face as she checked her own phone. "Marcos, the jet isn't ready for this weekend in the Hamptons," she fired, her voice sharp and demanding. "I said I wanted to go with the girls. What do you pay a logistics team for if they're all incompetent?" Marcos loosened the knot of his silk tie and stared at her. He wasn't looking for love in her eyes. He had stopped looking a long time ago, but he hoped for at least a trace of humanity. "It's my birthday, Samantha," he said, his voice deep, hoarse, hoping the phrase would stop the world for a second. Samantha paused her fingers over the screen, looking up for a fraction of a second. There was no surprise, no guilt, just a slight annoyance at being interrupted. "Oh, Marcos, please, you're 35, aren't you? Not a child to fuss over cake and candles. Besides, I already have reservations at a high-end restaurant with the girls. See you tomorrow. Leave your credit card at the reception. Mine's blocked." Without waiting for a response, Samantha turned and left. The sound of her heels retreating down the hall was all that remained. Marcos stood paralyzed. A bitter, dry laugh escaped his lips. There was his perfect life. There was the woman he had decided to bet his future on, the perfect partner for his public image. He was the richest man in the city, but at that exact moment, he felt like the most miserable human being on the face of the earth. He grabbed his perfectly tailored navy suit jacket and left the building. The drive to his Bel Air mansion was a silent funeral. As his sports car's engine roared down the illuminated avenues, Marcos's mind traveled 2 years into the past. He remembered an honest laugh. He remembered sweet eyes. He remembered Ana Maria. She used to brew cheap coffee in the mornings when his company was barely surviving. She celebrated his birthdays with a modest supermarket cake and an improvised candle, and he had discarded her like an expired contract when he met Samantha Sterling's family and saw the opportunity to enter the true millionaire elite. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Regret was a slow poison. He arrived at his estate. The immense black iron gates opened automatically. The Bellwether mansion stood imposing, minimalist, with smooth cream-toned walls and immense windows. It looked like a museum, a tomb of marble and crystal, where nothing ever happened outside of what was planned. Marcos turned off the engine and sighed deeply. All he wanted was to pour himself a glass of Scotch whiskey, sit on his Italian leather sofa, and let the day end in the most absolute and impeccable silence. He entered the security code at the main door. The electronic lock clicked open with a metallic sound. He pushed the heavy wooden door, but the silence he expected never came. What hit his ears was a sound that didn't belong in his world. A sharp cry followed by a child's giggle that echoed off the high walls of his hall. Marcos frowned, his muscles tensing. What the hell was happening in his house? He advanced quickly down the main corridor, his heart pounding furiously against his ribs. Natural daylight streamed in torrents through the immense windows of his luxury living room, bathing the space in a warm glow that contrasted with his own gloomy mood. He turned the corner towards the main room, and his feet froze on the fine hardwood floor. The air abandoned his lungs in a second. The scene before him defied all logic. It seemed like a hallucination, a head-on collision between his rigid, impeccable world and a hurricane of pure, chaotic life. Right in the center of his living room, on his expensive mahogany coffee table, were 2 children, 2 small boys no more than a year old, blonde with chubby cheeks and bright eyes full of pure adrenaline. They wore small denim overalls and tiny red sneakers that stomped on the polished wood without mercy. But that wasn't the worst. What almost gave Marcos a heart attack was what they were doing. The babies had their faces and hands completely covered in colored frosting. They were in the middle of a pitched battle, grabbing pieces of a huge decorated birthday cake and throwing them at each other. Pieces of bread, crumbs, and meringue flew through the air in slow motion. The table was unrecognizable. A white tablecloth, which must have been from the formal dinnerware, was stained with sweets. There were dessert plates, chocolates, small rolls, and party candies scattered and crushed everywhere. The cake candles were still lit, half crushed, threatening to fall onto the expensive Persian rugs. It was an absolute disaster, a vibrant, noisy, and strangely tender chaos that was profaning his sanctuary of silence. And behind the table, oblivious to the homeowner's presence, was she, a housekeeper. She wore an impeccable blue maid's uniform with a perfectly ironed white collar, although it was now splattered with sugar. She had on bright lemon-yellow rubber cleaning gloves. Instead of being horrified by the disaster, the woman was leaning forward, laughing heartily, a genuine, deep laugh that slightly crinkled her eyes as she interacted with the twins. She was completely immersed in the game, dodging pieces of cake with a radiant, bright smile under the light streaming in from the window. Marcos couldn't articulate a word. The impeccable navy suit jacket felt like a straitjacket. He brought both hands to his head in a dramatic gesture of despair, his eyes wide open. His jaw literally dropped. He was the most feared magnate in the country, the man who made bankers tremble. And at that moment, he looked like a petrified statue before two children in red sneakers who were destroying his living room. "Take that, sugar monster," exclaimed the woman in the blue uniform, her voice vibrating with joy as she gently wiped the nose of one of the children with her yellow-gloved finger. That voice. Marcos's heart gave a brutal jolt. That playful tone, that soft cadence, yet full of sparkle. Marcos felt the mansion floor disappear under his Italian leather shoes. His breath caught. The blood began to hum in his ears so loudly that the sound of the laughing babies seemed to fade into a distant echo. Marcos slowly lowered his hands from his head. His fingers trembled. What does this mean?" Marcos managed to utter in a rough whisper that cut through the festive atmosphere like a guillotine blade. The woman stopped laughing instantly. The laughter died in the air, the maid's back completely tensed beneath the blue uniform. Slowly, as if she knew the whole world was about to collapse on her shoulders, she lowered her arms with the yellow gloves and began to turn towards him. When her face was finally illuminated by the natural light coming through the enormous windows, Marcos Bellwether's chest received an invisible but devastating blow. A direct impact in the center of his ego, his memory, and his soul. It was her Ana Maria Rodriguez. Marcos's world, that empire of skyscrapers, bank accounts with infinite zeros, tailored suits, and high society fiancés, crumbled into 1,000 pieces on the Persian rug, which cost more than any ordinary person's entire life. Her eyes, those unmistakable honey-colored eyes that once looked at him with the purest devotion a human being could offer. Now they watched him with a mixture of terror, disbelief, and a deep, incurable wound. Her brown hair, which used to fall free and wild over her shoulders when they shared that tiny, unheated apartment, was now pulled back in a rigid, disciplined bun, typical of a domestic worker. Her skin, once radiant, seemed pale, marked by the fatigue and harshness of unforgiving labor. Marcos felt the blood drain from his face. His knees trembled beneath his cashmere trousers. It couldn't be. The mathematical probabilities of this happening were nil. Of all the cleaning agencies in New York, of all the mansions in Bel Air, fate had decided to spit in his face precisely on his 35th birthday. 2 years ago, he had left her. He simply packed his things in silence, one dawn. He left a paltry check on the kitchen table they shared and departed to sign the contract of his life and commit to Samantha Sterling. He deleted her number, blocked her social media, eliminated her from his existence, as if Ana Maria had been a simple miscalculation in his ascent to the top. And now the woman whose heart he had shattered stood before him, dressed as his maid, cleaning his mahogany table. Ana Maria didn't say a single word. Her lips trembled slightly. Her eyes, fixed on the millionaire's pale face, began to well up. The horror of the situation hit her with the same force it hit him. She didn't know whose house this was. The agency had sent her as an emergency that very morning, with a strict order. The owner is never home. Clean. Take care of the children you're allowed to bring today, and leave before 8. The silence in the room was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Suddenly, one of the blonde twins, oblivious to the emotional storm destroying the two adults before him, let out an innocent giggle. He grabbed a huge piece of chocolate cake with his small, frosting-covered hands and smashed it against a fine porcelain plate. Crash! The sharp sound of breaking porcelain broke the spell. The boy babbled, extending his dirty little hands towards Ana Maria, demanding attention. This simple noise acted like a detonator in Marcos's brain. The shock, guilt, and regret that threatened to bring him to his knees were quickly stifled by the only emotion he had learned to use as a protective shield over the past 2 years. Rage, a blind, defensive, and savage rage. Marcos Bellwether clenched his fists at his sides until his nails painfully dug into his palms. His jaw tensed, marking the hard line of his face. He couldn't let her see how she had disarmed him. Not on his territory, not in his home. He owned everything. He was the man who answered to no one. He straightened his back, regaining the imposing posture of the corporate predator everyone feared, and took 2 firm steps towards the center of the room. His leather shoes resonated like gunshots. "What the hell does this mean?" His voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, guttural roar, laden with a hostility that made the window panes vibrate. Ana Maria took a step back purely instinctively, tripping slightly on the edge of the rug. Terror crossed her face for a fraction of a second, but immediately afterwards, her eyes flew to the 2 children on the table. Maternal instinct crushed any trace of fear. With a swift, violent movement full of wounded dignity, Ana Maria tore off the yellow cleaning gloves and threw them onto the remains of the cake. She positioned herself in front of the mahogany table, using her own slender body as a human shield between the enraged millionaire and the 2 one-year-old twins. "I asked a question," Marcos exploded, completely losing the control he so boasted of having. He pointed an accusing finger at the mess around them, deliberately ignoring the fact that he perfectly knew the woman before him. "Look at you. Look at my house. Look at my living room. Who gave you permission to come in here and turn my property into a daycare?" Ana Maria lifted her chin. Her breath was ragged. Her chest rose and fell rapidly beneath the blue uniform, but she did not avert her gaze. Her honey-colored eyes, once frightened, now glowed with a burning fury, a strength Marcos had never seen when they were together. "The luxury service agency sent me this morning," Ana Maria replied. Her voice trembled on the first syllable but quickly found its center. It was a cold, cutting voice, devoid of any past affection. "They hired me for an emergency shift. They told me the owner wouldn't be home all weekend." "Well, they lied to you," Marcos spat, closing the distance between them. The vein in his neck visibly pulsed beneath the impeccable collar of his white shirt. "This is my house, mine, and I don't pay thousands of dollars to a security agency to let any maid with." Marcos stopped his words abruptly. His dark eyes, injected with a mixture of rage and despair, shifted for the first time from Ana Maria to the table. The 2 small children both now looked at him in complete silence. Their large, round eyes, framed by messy blonde curls, were fixed on the giant in the blue suit who was shouting. One of the twins, the one with the denim overalls most stained with chocolate, let out a small whimper, startled by the man's volume. Marcos felt a block of ice settle in the pit of his stomach. He tried to swallow saliva, but his throat was dry as sandpaper. "Whose children are these?" Marcos asked. And this time his voice didn't sound like a roar, but like a dangerous hiss. The tone of a man who is about to discover that the ground beneath him is mined. Ana Maria clenched her teeth. Her hands flew instinctively behind her, touching the baby's small legs to assure them she was there, protecting them from the monster in the suit. "That doesn't concern you, Mr. Belvedere." Ana Maria shot back, using his surname as if it were an insult, a verbal slap that echoed through the room. "They were authorized to enter with me by the house manager. If you have a problem with the service, call the agency and fire me. I'll clean up this mess in 5 minutes and be out of your perfect, empty life." Marcos felt the blow of the word empty. It was as if she could see through his expensive suit, straight into the miserable loneliness he had felt in his office just an hour ago. He took another step towards her, ignoring her warning. His gaze was no longer on Ana Maria. His gaze was fixed like a laser on the face of the twin sitting on the left. The boy looked at him with curiosity, having overcome his initial fright. He tilted his little head to one side. Marcos stopped breathing. That way of looking, that tilt of the head, the exact shape of the lower jaw, even hidden under baby fat and vanilla frosting. It was like looking at a mirror distorted by time. It was like looking at a photograph of himself 34 years ago. A photograph his deceased mother kept in an old drawer. "I told you." Marcos lowered his voice to a terrifying whisper, his eyes fixed on the boy, his mind working at lightning speed, calculating dates, counting months back with a precision that was driving him insane. "Whose children are these, Ana Maria?" The name escaped his lips before he could stop it. The pronunciation of those 4 syllables shattered the professional barrier they were both trying to maintain. Upon hearing her name in that deep voice that once swore eternal love to her, Ana Maria closed her eyes for a second. A single, traitorous, inevitable tear slid down her pale cheek. She opened her eyes abruptly, defiant, willing to take her secret to the grave before giving that man the satisfaction of the truth. But before Ana Maria could utter the lie she had prepared on the tip of her tongue, the sound of a clearing throat at the entrance of the hallway made them both turn their heads sharply. standing in the doorway of the ruined living room, hands clasped behind his back and an expression of solemn serenity, was Mr. Henderson, the general manager of the mansion, the man who had served the Bellwether family for 40 years. Mr. Henderson looked at the destroyed cake, looked at the stained faces of the babies, looked at Anna Maria's restrained tears, and finally rested his old, wise eyes on his employer's distraught face. "It was I, Mr. Bellwether, Mr." Henderson said in a calm voice that contrasted violently with the tension in the room. "I let her in. I authorized the children, and I believe it's time to stop shouting because you're frightening your birthday guests." Marcos turned his neck with such violence that a dull crack ran down his spine. His eyes, dark and lit by a mixture of rage and absolute confusion, fixed on the elderly man who had just spoken. Mr. Henderson did not back down. At his age, dressed in his impeccable gray manager's suit, he was the only human being in all of New York City who did not fear Marcos Bellwether. He had seen him grow up. He had seen him fall off his bike at 5 years old. And more recently, he had seen him sell his soul for a bank account with too many zeros. "What did you just say, Henderson?" Marcos's voice was a lethal whisper, a thread of sound that tore at his throat. The old manager took a step forward, crossing the threshold into the ruined room. His shoes made no sound on the wood. His posture was straight, dignified, unbreakable. "I said I brought her, Mr. Bellwether. I pulled strings with the service agency this morning. I specifically requested that Miss Anna Maria be sent, and I authorized her to bring the little ones under the pretense that the house would be empty for your birthday." Marcos's brain seemed to be short-circuiting. He looked at Henderson, then at Anna Maria, then at the babies, and finally, back at Henderson. "You're fired!" Marcos burst out, corporate instinct taking control in the face of betrayal. "Get out of my house right now, both of you. Leave." But Henderson didn't even blink. "I will leave if you order me to, young man. But first you will listen to me. Today is your 35th birthday. I arrived at this house at 6 in the morning. I saw your fiancée, Miss Sterling, rush out, complaining that they hadn't prepared the private jet for her to go party with her friends. I saw your personal cell phone on your desk in the office, connected to the charger, without a single notification. No one from your prestigious board called you. No one from your golf club came to visit you. You have built an empire of crystal, Mr. Bellwether, but you are completely alone within it. You are freezing to death in your own palace." Henderson's words struck Marcos like hammers to the chest. They were the absolute truth, raw and unanesthetized. "That doesn't give you the right to bring her into my house," Marcos shouted, pointing at Anna Maria, not daring to look her directly in the eye. "You betrayed me." "I saved you from yourself," Henderson corrected with an implacable calm. "I reviewed the agency records in the city months ago. I knew Miss Anna Maria was working day and night, cleaning other people's floors. And I knew that you, although you will never admit it, have not slept a single night in peace since the day you abandoned her." Anna Maria couldn't take it anymore. The sound of the word abandoned broke the dam of her self-control. She grabbed a damp cloth from the table and, with hands trembling violently, began to clean the face of one of the twins with almost desperate force. She wanted to erase the cake. She wanted to erase the evidence that they were there. She wanted to become invisible. "Enough!" Anna Maria screamed. Her voice echoed off the high walls, laden with wounded and fierce dignity. "Don't talk about me as if I were a charity project, Mr. Henderson. You lied to me. You told me the owner of this house was a foreign businessman. If I had known this floor belonged to him, I would have preferred my children, and I died of hunger in the street before crossing that door." Marcos felt a bucket of ice water dumped over his head. Died of hunger. That phrase carved into his brain. He slowly turned to her. The fury had disappeared, replaced by genuine, dark, and painful bewilderment. "Hunger?" Marcos took a step towards the table, ignoring the imaginary barrier between them. "Anna Maria, what the hell are you talking about? I left you a check. I left you enough money in that account for you to live comfortably for years. I made sure you lacked nothing." Anna Maria stopped the damp cloth inches from the baby's cheek, looking up. Her honey-colored eyes burned with a contempt so pure, so absolute, that Marcos felt the physical impulse to recoil. "Your check." Anna Maria let out a dry laugh, devoid of any joy, a laugh that sounded like broken glass. "I tore your damn check into 1,000 pieces the same day I found it on the kitchen table. I didn't want a single cent of yours. I didn't want anything that came from the man who used me as a pastime while he found a woman with a surname that would serve his business." Marcos opened his mouth to defend himself, to articulate some logical excuse, some corporate justification that would explain why he left her. but the words died on his tongue. There was no defense. She was right. Ana Maria threw the stained cloth on the table, picked up one of the babies by the arms and lifted him, pressing him protectively against her chest, staining her blue uniform with the frosting that still covered the child's clothes. "Did you hear, Mr. Bellwether?" Ana Maria said, her tone suddenly cold, professional, and distant, looking at Henderson. "We're fired. I'm taking my children and leaving through the service door. Don't worry, Mr. Bellwether. The mess on your table will be deducted from my salary at the agency. Have a happy birthday in your castle." She turned to pick up the second child, but before her fingers could touch the boy, Marcos stepped in. It was a quick, impulsive movement, driven by an invisible force Marcos didn't know he possessed. His body, accustomed to calculating every step in boardrooms and press conferences, acted out of pure animal instinct. He blocked Ana Maria's path. He didn't touch her, but his large size and the breadth of his suited shoulders closed off any escape route. He stood inches from the mahogany table, inches from the second child. "Get out of the way, Marcos," Ana Maria warned, her voice dropping a dangerous octave, trembling with pure adrenaline. She pressed the boy she held against her chest, almost crushing him in her desperation to protect him. Marcos didn't move. His breathing was heavy, erratic. All the magnate's attention, all the intensity of his dark eyes, shifted from Ana Maria and descended like a dead weight towards the baby, who remained seated on the wood, surrounded by chocolate cake remains. The boy in the small, color-splattered denim overalls didn't seem frightened by the giant's sudden proximity. On the contrary, the baby blinked his big round eyes. He tilted his head and, with pure, malicious-free curiosity, extended one of his chubby little hands, completely covered in white meringue. The small hand impacted directly against the lapel of Marcos's impeccable designer suit jacket. Ana Maria stifled a cry of panic, expecting the millionaire to explode in rage over his ruined clothing. She expected him to swat it away, but Marcos Bellwether did absolutely nothing. He looked at the small, stained hand clinging to his lapel, felt the pressure of those tiny fingers against his chest, and then slowly lifted his gaze to the boy's face. Time stopped again, but this time it wasn't due to visual impact. It was due to an internal demolition. Marcos saw. He saw with a clarity that left him breathless. He saw the exact shape of his own eyebrows on that tiny face. He saw the same stubborn curve in the chin. He saw the same dark depth in the eyes that returned his gaze with an innocent challenge. That boy was not a stranger. That boy was a mirror of blood and bone. A cold sweat ran down his neck. His pulse pounded in his ears with the force of an industrial drill. Ana Maria. The name scraped in his throat. Marcos didn't take his eyes off the baby. His large, trembling hand rose instinctively, stopping millimeters from the boy's blonde hair, not daring to touch it. "How old are they?" Ana Maria recoiled a step, bumping against the back of one of the dining room chairs. Her face turned mortally pale. "Don't come near him," she hissed, whispering so as not to scare the children, but with a lethal fury vibrating in every syllable. "Tell me how old they are." Marcos's voice broke. It wasn't an authoritative shout. It was a broken, desperate plea. He turned his face towards her. His eyes, always cold and unreadable, were now bloodshot, wide open with the absolute terror of the answer he was about to receive. Ana Maria pressed her lips until they became a white line. She wanted to lie. She wanted to scream that they were 8 months old, that they were 2 years old, that they belonged to another man, that the universe was simply playing a cruel trick. But under Marcos's scrutinizing, devastated, and relentless gaze, the lie choked in her throat. She couldn't protect the secret forever. Biology itself was betraying her in that baby's face. "They're 1 year old," Ana Maria whispered. 2 words, 2 simple words, that fell into the room like an atomic bomb. The silence that followed was sepulchral. Marcos Bellwether's brain, a brilliant machine trained to calculate financial risks, interest rates, and future projections in fractions of a second, began to perform the only mathematical equation that truly mattered in his life. 1 year, 12 months since they were born, 9 months of pregnancy, 12 plus 9, 21 months. The number hit the exact center of his memory, 21 months. Exactly 1 year and 9 months ago, in the first week of October, he had packed his leather briefcase in the middle of the night. He had left Ana Maria sleeping in that cheap bed with the sagging mattress. He had signed that paltry check, placed it under the coffee cup in the kitchen, and had closed the door forever, getting into the black car that would take him to his new life with Samantha Sterling. 21 months. The air violently abandoned Marcos's lungs. His knees gave out for a fraction of a second, making him stagger slightly backward. He had to steady himself with a hand on the mahogany table, crushing a piece of vanilla cake to avoid falling to the floor. You were. Marcos couldn't articulate the full sentence. Terror choked him. He felt his heart turn so violently that he thought it would stop. You were expecting my child the night I left? Ana Maria looked at him from across the table. The fear had disappeared from her eyes, giving way to absolute coldness, an armor of ice forged in nights of tears and dawns spent cleaning offices. 2, actually, Ana Maria replied with astonishing calm. Her voice didn't tremble. There were no tears on her face, only the firmness of a woman who had already survived hell. I was expecting 2 of your children, Marcos. Twins. Marcos lowered his head. The magnate, untouchable, the business shark, closed his eyes tightly as the crushing weight of the truth broke his spine. He had abandoned the only woman who had loved him unconditionally. Pregnant. He left her in misery, alone, carrying his own children in her womb, while he celebrated million-dollar contracts and posed for society magazines with a plastic fiancée. The pain that pierced his chest was physical, real, sharp as a rusty blade. He tried to breathe in, but the oxygen wouldn't come. He opened his eyes, filled with a glistening moisture he hadn't felt since he was a child, and looked at the 2 children. His children wore cheap red sneakers. Their mother wore a stained maid's uniform, and he wore a watch that cost more than the house where she probably lived. Ana Maria, for God's sake! Marcos ran his free hand over his face, a gesture of pure agony, disbelief, and self-disgust. Why? Why did you never look for me? Why did you never tell me? You had my number. You knew my offices. Why did you let them live like this? Ana Maria's face transformed. The icy calm broke, giving way to a volcanic fury, an indignation so deep that it made her own foundations tremble. Why didn't I look for you? Ana Maria's voice rose in volume, echoing in every corner of the luxurious mansion, cutting the air like a whip. Because you made your decision, Marcos. You chose your damn crystal world. You left me like a dog in the middle of the night because I wasn't refined enough for your new partners. Look at you. Look at your house. Look at your suit. Do you think my children deserve a father who flees in the darkness out of cowardice? I didn't want your pity. I didn't want your money stained with guilt. I wanted a man, and you stopped being one the day you walked out that door. Marcos received the direct impact. He didn't try to defend himself. Every word from Ana Maria was a direct hit to his conscience, and he knew he deserved every single one. He slowly raised his head, his eyes red, ready to accept total humiliation, ready to crawl, if necessary, to beg for forgiveness. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer her the entire world if she asked. But before he could utter a single syllable, the sound of the mansion's front door bursting open echoed in the hallway, followed by the unmistakable, sharp click of designer heels rapidly approaching the living room. Marcos! Samantha's high-pitched, irritated voice, laden with arrogance, echoed before she appeared in the doorway. I forgot my credit card in your office, and those stupid security guards wouldn't let me. Samantha entered the room and stopped abruptly. Her eyes swept over the scene, the destroyed cake, the babies on the polished wood, Ana Maria in her blue uniform, and Marcos, the untouchable man, on the verge of tears before the maid. The perfect storm had just erupted. Samantha Sterling's stiletto heels, a limited edition from Paris that cost the same as any common worker's annual salary, stopped abruptly at the edge of the Persian rug. Her designer bag slipped slightly from her shoulder. Her eyes, perfectly outlined and devoid of any empathy, scanned the living room. She didn't look at Marcos first. She looked at the mess. She saw the fine white tablecloth stained with chocolate, the shattered porcelain on the floor, the frosting smeared on the silk sofa cushions, and finally, the 2 small children sitting on the immaculate mahogany table. Then, her gaze fixed on Ana Maria. On the blue maid's uniform, Samantha's face contorted into a mask of pure disgust. What does this mean? Samantha shrieked, her sharp voice breaking the tense silence like crystal shattering against a wall. Marcos, can you explain why your living room looks like a damned pigsty? And why there's a trashy maid letting her brats destroy furniture worth more than her miserable life? Ana Maria clenched her jaw until it hurt. Her hands, still trembling from the confession she had just made to Marcos, clung to the small bodies of her children. She didn't retreat an inch. Over the past 2 years, she had endured humiliations, hunger, and contempt. But no one was going to insult her children to her face. No one. Marcos, for his part, remained paralyzed. His mind was still processing the atomic impact of knowing that those 2 blonde children were his flesh and blood. He still felt the echo of the word twins ricocheting in his skull. Samantha's shrill voice reached him as if from underwater, an irritating and distant noise. I'm talking to you, Marcos. Samantha took 2 threatening steps towards the center of the room, pointing a perfectly manicured finger directly at Anna Maria's face. "You, useless maid. Grab your disgusting bastards and get out of this house right now. Look what they've done to the rug. I swear, I'll make the agency charge you every last cent, and then I'll make sure you never clean another bathroom in this entire city." The insult hung in the air. Disgusting bastards. Something broke inside Marcos. It was a physical snap audible only to him. The paralyzing pain, the suffocating guilt, and the terror of having abandoned his own children evaporated in a millisecond, replaced by a fury so dark, so primitive, and so lethal that the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees at once. Samantha didn't notice the change. She was too busy with her rich girl tantrum. She pulled out her latest model phone with abrupt movements, typing frantically. "I'm calling security right now," Samantha continued, not taking her hateful gaze off Anna Maria. "You're going to leave here in handcuffs, you idiot. And those brats are going straight to the shut up." It was a single word, a hoarse, deep whisper, uttered in a tone so low and chilling that it made Samantha stop her thumbs on the touchscreen immediately. Samantha looked up, offended, expecting to see the usual Marcos, the calculating businessman who always agreed with her to avoid social scandals. But the man looking at her was not her corporate fiancé. He was a predator about to strike. Marcos straightened up. His broad shoulders completely blocked Samantha's view of Anna Maria and the boys. His face was deathly pale, but his dark eyes burned with a contained violence that made Samantha take an involuntary step back. "What did you say?" Samantha stammered, offended by the tone. "Marcos, what's wrong with you? This woman brought her children into our house. They're ruining us." "Call her maid again," Marcos interrupted, his voice vibrating with pure, absolute threat as he took a step towards Samantha. "Insult those children again, and I swear to God, Samantha, I will destroy you, your father's company, and your entire damn surname before dawn." Samantha's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her phone almost slipped from her hands. Never in their 2-year relationship had Marcos raised his voice to her. Never had he looked at her with such disgust. Anna Maria, behind Marcos's broad back, watched him with wide eyes. Her heart pounded wildly in her throat. This was the ruthless man they talked about in the news, the corporate giant, but this time he was defending her. "Marcos, you're going crazy," Samantha tried to retort, though her voice trembled, feeling control of the situation slipping through her diamond-covered fingers. "You're threatening me over some common maid. I'm your fiancé. I'm the woman you're going to marry in 3 months. My father is the principal partner of your construction company." Marcos didn't blink. The coldness of his gaze was terrifying. "Not anymore," he sentenced. The silence in the mansion became suffocating. Samantha blinked twice, her elite brain refusing to process the 2 simple syllables she had just heard. "What?" she blurted out with a nervous, forced laugh. "What are you talking about?" Marcos advanced until he was inches from her, looking down at her, stripping away any trace of respect or affection he had ever had for her. He saw the superficiality of her face, the selfishness injected into her veins, the coldness with which she had just called his own children bastards, and he felt nauseous. "The wedding is off, Samantha," Marcos said, each word hitting the air like a steel hammer. "The engagement ends here today, this damn second." Samantha's jaw dropped. All color drained from her made-up face. "You can't do this to me!" She exploded, completely losing her composure, her voice becoming a hysterical scream. "The invitations have already been sent. The merger of our companies depends on this marriage. You're going to make me a laughingstock in front of all New York society for a stupid tantrum. I don't care about New York society. I don't care about your father. And I don't care about the merger." Marcos spat, pointing to the entrance door with a firm finger, without taking his eyes off hers. "Keep the ring. Take it as compensation for these 2 lost years. But I want you off my property right now." Samantha breathed agitatedly. Her eyes darted from Marcos to Anna Maria, trying to connect the dots, trying to understand why the coldest magnate in the city was throwing an empire away for a woman who cleaned floors. "It's her, isn't it?" Samantha hissed, her eyes full of tears of rage and humiliation. "You're sleeping with the maid! It's disgusting, Marcos! It's pathetic!" Marcos didn't shout. He didn't need to. True authority doesn't shout. "She's not a maid," Marcos said, and for the first time all night, his voice had a shade of respect, of pure reverence, a tone he never used with Samantha. "She's the owner of the only part of my soul that was ever worth anything. And those children you just insulted are my sons." The blow was devastating. Samantha recoiled as if she had been punched in the stomach. She looked at the twins on the table, looked at Anna Maria's hardened face, and finally looked at the lethal determination in Marcos's eyes. She knew in that instant that she had lost, that there was no manipulation, no crying, no financial threat that could save her. "You'll regret this, Marcos Bellwether." Samantha spat with venom, turning abruptly. "My father will ruin you. You'll be left with nothing." "Let him try," he replied, unshaken. "Now get out of my house." Samantha's heels echoed violently against the hardwood floor as she walked quickly towards the exit. She didn't look back. Seconds later, the heavy thud of the front door closing reverberated throughout the mansion, making the picture frames tremble, and suddenly, absolute silence returned. The storm had passed, leaving only rubble in its wake. The enormous luxury living room seemed larger, emptier, and at the same time infinitely smaller. Marcos stood in the middle of the rug, his back to the table. The imposing magnate's shoulders slowly slumped, as if tons of pressure had been lifted from him, only to be crushed by even greater guilt. He had protected his children, he had expelled the woman he despised, but he knew perfectly well that this did not erase the past. It did not erase 21 months of abandonment, it did not erase the floors. Ana Maria had to scrub on her knees while pregnant. Slowly, like a prisoner walking to his execution, Marcos Bellwether turned to face Ana Maria. She remained in the same position, protecting the babies. Her honey-colored eyes watched him, scrutinizing him, looking for some trick, some corporate lie behind the act of heroism she had just witnessed. But she didn't find a businessman. She found a man completely broken. One of the twins, ignoring the overwhelming tension that floated between his parents, clapped his hands in the air and babbled, pointing at the extinguished, half-crushed candles that still remained on the chocolate cake debris. Marcos looked at the boy. His lower lip trembled. He took a slow step towards the table, his hands open at his sides, showing that he was not a threat, showing that he surrendered completely. "Ana Maria," he pleaded, his voice broken for the first time in his life. "Please, tell me everything." The echo of Samantha's departure still vibrated in the mansion walls, but inside the living room, the silence was absolute. A heavy, dense silence, laden with the weight of 21 months of lies, cowardice, and accumulated pain. Marcos Bellwether, the man who made boards tremble with a single look, the magnate who controlled the financial threads of the city, stood amidst the remains of a chocolate cake, completely disarmed. His corporate shield had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. No designer suit, no bank account could protect him from the emotional abyss opening beneath his feet. Slowly, as if each movement cost him his life, Marcos closed the distance to the mahogany table. Ana Maria did not recoil. There was no more fear in her honey-colored eyes. She had seen Marcos confront Samantha. She had seen how he threw his empire out the window to defend the boys. But that did not erase the nights of hunger. That did not heal the original wound. She maintained her firm posture, protecting the twins with her body, awaiting the blow. Marcos stopped 1.5 feet from her. His dark eyes, bloodshot and shining with a vulnerability Ana Maria had never seen, descended toward the 2 blonde children. One of the twins was busy trying to eat a piece of yellow frosting from his own fingers, ignoring the deadly tension between the adults. The other boy lifted his cake-stained face and fixed his large round eyes on Marcos, a pure, clean, innocent gaze. Marcos's chest rose and fell violently. He tried to swallow, but his throat felt full of sand. "Ana Maria." Marcos's voice was no more than a harsh whisper, a plea that scraped the air in the room. "I need to hear it from your mouth. I need you to tell me," looking into my eyes. "The dates coincide. My own face is looking back at me and these children, but I need to hear it." Ana Maria pressed her lips. The fury within her fought against the exhaustion of having carried this secret alone for so long. "Hear what, Marcos?" she replied with a cutting coldness that chilled the millionaire's blood. "Do you want me to confirm what your brilliant brain has already calculated?" Marcos nodded slowly, closing his eyes for a second. A single heavy tear, laden with regret, slid down his cheek, lost along his jawline. "Yes," he pleaded, opening his eyes and fixing them on hers. "Tell me, are they mine?" The question hung in the air of the ruined room. It was the final confirmation, the point of no return. Ana Maria lifted her chin, took a deep breath, and fired the truth without anesthetic. "Yes, they are yours, Marcos. They carry your blood. They have your eyes. They have the stubbornness of your character. They are your children." Marcos felt his knees give out. The impact of those 2 syllables, spoken aloud, was a magnitude 9 earthquake directly in his conscience. He had to grab the edge of the mahogany table to keep from falling to his knees on the cake remains. His breathing became erratic, almost asthmatic. "My God," he stammered, covering his mouth with a trembling hand, looking at the twins as if they were both a miracle and a condemnation. "My children, I have children." Marcos extended a trembling hand towards the nearest baby. His fingers stopped inches from the messy blonde curls, terrified of touching them, terrified of contaminating them with the same cowardice that had made him flee 2 years ago. What are their names?" he asked, his voice breaking on the last syllable. Ana Maria lowered her gaze towards the boys. For the first time that night, the mask of coldness softened slightly. The unconditional love of a mother shone on her tired face. "Gael," she said softly, pointing to the boy who was staring at him. "And the one eating the frosting is Ravi." Gael and Ravi. Marcos repeated the names as if they were a sacred prayer. He savored them on his tongue, feeling the weight of fatherhood crushing his lungs. "My children, my boys!" Suddenly, Marcos looked up. Despair distorted his features. "But why, Ana Maria?" The pain exploded in his voice, a desperate complaint that ricocheted off the high ceilings of the mansion. "I swear I didn't know. I swear on my life that if I had known you were pregnant, I would never in a million years have walked out that door. I would have given up everything, the company, Samantha, everything. Why did you hide something so big from me? Why did you steal my right to be their father?" Ana Maria took a step forward. The softness vanished from her face instantly. Her honey-colored eye lit up with a lethal fire. "I stole your right," Ana Maria hissed, her voice trembling with pure rage. She pointed at Marcos's chest with a cake-stained finger, mentally pushing him into the abyss. "You stole it from yourself, Marcos. You lost that right the night you decided my love wasn't enough for you." Ana Maria's accusation hit Marcos with the force of a freight train. He didn't try to defend himself. He stood there, receiving the impact, because he knew, deep in his soul, that every word was a just condemnation. Ana Maria let out a bitter, dry laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You want to know why I didn't tell you?" Ana Maria began. And this time, the professional tone completely disappeared. It was the voice of a survivor, of a woman who had walked through hell barefoot. "Do you want to know what happened after you left your paltry check on the kitchen table and left like a thief in the dark of dawn?" Marcos swallowed hard, terror paralyzing his muscles. He nodded slowly. "I woke up alone," Ana Maria continued, fixing her gaze on him, forcing him to see the invisible wounds he had inflicted. "I saw the check. I saw the empty closet. I dragged myself to the bathroom and vomited until I felt my insides tearing. I thought it was the pain of you having shattered my heart. I thought I was dying of sadness. I went to a cheap drugstore that same afternoon. I bought 3 tests. All 3 were positive." Marcos closed his eyes tightly. The physical pain in his chest was unbearable. "Do you know what I felt at that moment, Marcos?" Ana Maria's voice dropped an octave, becoming a dark, relentless whisper. "I felt terror because the man who had promised me the world, the man who told me I was his anchor, had just sold me out for a construction company. And I was alone, without a job, without money, and with 2 lives growing inside me." "I left you money, Ana Maria," Marcos whispered weakly, a pathetic attempt to alleviate his own guilt. "I left you enough or I tore your damn check," Ana Maria shouted, the echo of her anger making the baby stop playing and look at her in surprise. She took a deep breath, instantly lowering her voice so as not to scare them. "I tore it up, Marcos, because if I accepted your money, I accepted that you had bought me. I accepted that I was just another transaction in your stupid climb to the top. My dignity and my children were priceless." Marcos looked at her, devastated. The imposing figure of the magnate seemed small, withered before the giant fortress of the woman in the blue uniform. "Do you have any idea what it's like to clean public restrooms with a 6-month belly?" Ana Maria continued relentlessly, forcing him to swallow every ounce of her pain. "Do you have any idea what it's like to scrub shopping mall floors at 3 in the morning, feeling your children gasping for air because you haven't eaten anything but a piece of stale bread all day long?" "Enough," Marcos pleaded, falling to his knees on the Persian rug. His navy trousers were stained with meringue and chocolate, but he didn't care. The pain was suffocating him. He clutched his head with both hands, hiding his face as tears began to wet his fingers. "Please, Ana Maria, enough. You're killing me." "No, don't you dare ask me to stop," she demanded, relentless. "You want the truth? Take the whole thing." "I bled, Marcos. At 8 months, I collapsed, cleaning offices 3 blocks from your damn corporate building. They rushed me to a public hospital where there weren't even enough beds. I gave birth alone on a rusty stretcher, terrified, thinking I was going to lose them. Marcos let out a muffled sob. The cold steel man broke completely. The sound of his raw, lacerating crying filled the living room. And when I held them in my arms, Ana Maria's voice finally broke. A single tear slipped down her pale cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She kept her gaze high. When I saw them for the first time, so small, so perfect, I made the hardest decision of my life. I saw your face in them. I saw the same dark eyes, and I swore to myself that I would never allow the man who discarded us like trash to come near them. Ana Maria took a step towards the kneeling millionaire. Her voice was no longer a scream. It was a firm, definitive sentence. I didn't hide them for revenge, Marcos. I hid them to protect them. Because a man who needs to humiliate others to feel powerful, a man who sells himself to the highest bidder for social prestige, is not a man. I preferred my children to grow up believing their father was dead than to grow up knowing their father was a coward who fled through the back door. Silence fell once more upon the mansion. Marcos was on the floor, surrounded by the crumbs of the destroyed birthday cake. His entire empire, all his millions, all his properties, were absolutely useless at that moment. Ana Maria had just shown him the immense and grotesque scar he had left, and no amount of zeros on a check could erase it. Gael, the twin in the dirtiest overalls, slipped off the edge of the mahogany table. Before Ana Maria could stop him, the boy crawled onto the ruined rug and stopped right in front of the man in the suit who was crying on the floor. The baby, not understanding the drama, not understanding the past or the mistakes, extended his small, chocolate-stained hand and gently touched Marcos's wet cheek. The contact was slight, just the damp brush of tiny, sticky fingers against the tense skin of his jaw. But for Marcos Bellwether, it felt as if a high-voltage lightning bolt had shot through his chest. Gael looked at him with that infinite curiosity, babbling an incomprehensible syllable as he left a mark of chocolate and vanilla frosting on Marcos's tear-soaked cheek. Marcos stopped breathing. His large hands, those that signed mass layoffs and multi-million-dollar corporate mergers without his pulse fluttering, rose uncontrollably in the air. He wanted to touch his son's tiny hand, wanted to cling to it as if it were a lifeline in the middle of the icy ocean he was drowning in. But before his fingers could even brush the boy's skin, Ana Maria reacted. She was quick, driven by a primitive and fierce instinct. She crouched down abruptly, grabbed Gael by the arms, and snatched him away from Marcos, pressing him against her chest with an almost savage protective force. "Don't touch him!" she screamed, recoiling 2 steps sharply, tripping over her own work shoes, her eyes wide with absolute panic that he might claim them. "Don't you dare lay a hand on them!" Marcos felt the instantaneous emptiness on his face. The cold returned suddenly, crueler than ever. He stood up, stumbling clumsily, moving like a cornered and wounded animal. Panic seized his nervous system. His brain, conditioned over the past years to solve any existential or corporate crisis with checkbooks and transfers, went into survival mode. "Fix it," his instinct screamed. "Buy it, pay the debt, make the pain stop." "Ana Maria, listen to me," Marcos began. His voice was a jumble of accelerated syllables, tripping over his own words as he took erratic steps across the room, stepping on broken porcelain without feeling it. "I was an imbecile. I was a monster. I know it. I was the worst scum in this world, but I can fix it. Look at me. I can fix it right now." Ana Maria looked at him as if the man before her was losing his sanity. She held Gael firmly in one arm, and with the other hand picked up Ravi from the table, securing both against her body. "Fix what, Marcos?" she asked, slowly backing towards the immense, dark hallway. "Everything," he exploded, spreading his arms wide, encompassing the immense mansion with a desperate and wild gesture. "All of this house, this immense house is yours. Right now, I'm calling my lawyers. Right now, Ana Maria, I'll put it in your name, in the boys' names. You'll never clean another damn floor in your life. You'll never go hungry again." Marcos rushed frantically to an elegant mahogany side table. He yanked open a drawer with such force it almost came off its runners and pulled out a checkbook and a heavy solid gold pen. His hands trembled with such violence that, as he turned, he knocked a designer crystal vase to the floor. It shattered into pieces. He didn't care. "Tell me a figure!" he shouted, his dark eyes completely wide, desperately searching for, in money, the forgiveness his rotten soul couldn't earn on its own. 100 million! I'll open a shielded trust for each of them today. They'll have the best schools in Europe, 24-hour private security. They'll inherit the damn bellwether empire. They won't lack absolutely anything. I'll give you my bank accounts. I'll give you my shares in the construction company. I'll give you everything. Just tell me how much." The silence that followed his desperate offer was the most terrifying, dense, and suffocating Marcos had experienced in his 35 years of life. Ana Maria didn't look at the checkbook. She didn't look at the shining gold pen. She didn't even look at the incalculable luxury that surrounded her in that enormous room. She looked at him. Her honey-colored eyes pierced him with such deep pity, with such raw and absolute disappointment, that Marcos felt the blood freeze in his veins. "You understood absolutely nothing," Ana Maria whispered. Her voice no longer held rage. There were no more shouts or fire. It held a mortal weariness, the lethargy of someone who realizes they are talking to an emotional corpse, to a man who had lost his humanity somewhere on the path to success. Marcos let the pen drop. The heavy golden metal bounced against the wooden floor with a pathetic hollow clink. "Marcos," Ana Maria murmured, feeling the oxygen disappear from the room. "Do you think everything in this life has a price?" she said, shaking her head slowly, pressing her children against her blue service uniform. "Do you think you can buy 21 months of crying, panic attacks in the dead of night, hunger, and loneliness with a piece of printed paper? Do you think a father's love and presence is a bank trust? You're still exactly the same hollow, cowardly, and calculating man who abandoned me 2 years ago." Marcos took a step towards her, extending a trembling, pleading hand. "No, no, I swear to you. I swear on my life. I just want them to be well. I want to protect them from the world." "My children are already well," Ana Maria interrupted with a firmness that cut the air like a scalpel. "They have a mother who breaks her back, her hands, and her pride for them every day, but who would never, listen to me very well, never abandon them for money or social position. We don't need your millions, Marcos. We don't need your disgusting rich man's guilt. And definitely, my children don't need a coward who believes that fatherhood is solved by writing a check and running from tears." Without adding another word, Ana Maria turned around with the 2 twins in her arms, oblivious to their parents' emotional destruction, stained with birthday cake and looking over their mother's shoulder. Ana Maria began to walk with a firm and quick step towards the long corridor that led to the service door. She was leaving. She was taking them away. The purest, most primitive, and irrational terror a human being can feel seized every cell of Marcos Bellwether's body. He was losing his family. He was watching the only real and honest light in his miserable existence turn the corner to disappear into darkness. This time, forever. "Ana Maria!" No. The scream didn't come from Marcos's throat. It came directly from his gut. It was a lacerating, animal roar, laden with such deep agony that it made the mansion's armored windows vibrate. He didn't think. He didn't calculate the risk. The untouchable magnate, the relentless business shark who humiliated his rivals with a simple look, broke into 1,000 pieces before nothingness. He ran after her. In his desperation to reach her, his expensive Italian leather shoes slipped violently on a large piece of vanilla frosting that had fallen to the floor during the boys' battle. Marcos completely lost his balance. His enormous body fell heavily forward, hitting the polished wooden floor with a violence that ripped a hoarse, muffled groan from him. But he didn't get up. He didn't want to get up. He no longer had the strength to sustain the lie of his greatness. He crawled. Marcos Bellwether, the man who made politicians and bankers pay him homage, literally crawled on his own knees, crushing the remains of porcelain and his birthday cake, staining his impeccable $1,000 navy suit with dirt, chocolate, meringue, and his own tears. He reached the edge of Ana Maria's white apron and blue maid's dress just a fraction of a second before she crossed the threshold into the exit corridor. He grabbed the cheap fabric with both hands, clenching his fist so hard that his knuckles turned white, clinging to her like a dying man, hanging on the edge of a cliff, feeling his fingers slip. The abrupt tug forced Ana Maria to stop suddenly. She turned quickly, ready to yell at him, ready to defend herself if he tried to use physical force to snatch the boys from her. But what she saw when she turned made her gasp. Marcos was on his knees at her feet. His face, always haughty, always sculpted into a perfect mask of arrogance, superiority, and calculated indifference, was completely disfigured by tears. His eyes were swollen, bloodshot. His perfectly combed back hair now fell in messy strands over his sweaty, pale forehead. He was breathing with extreme difficulty, choking on his own sobs, trembling from head to toe. He had stripped himself of everything, his pride, his monumental ego, his armor of money. Absolutely nothing remained of the untouchable millionaire, only a man terrified before the emptiness of his own life. "Please," Marcos begged. He pressed the apron fabric against his face, burying his face against Ana Maria's knees, staining her with his tears. "Please, I beg you, don't take them away. I implore you, Anna Maria. I implore you by what you love most in this cursed world. Don't leave me in this hell." Anna Maria felt a knot tightening in her throat. The visual impact of seeing this destroyed giant at her feet was too strong. She tried to take a step back, tried to free the fabric of her uniform, but he wouldn't let go. His grip wasn't violent. It was an anchor of pure desperation. "Let go of me, Marcos," she pleaded. Her voice, which had been a blade of ice just a minute ago, now trembled uncontrollably. "You're scaring the children. Let go of me and let us go." But the twins weren't scared. From the height of their mother's arms, they looked at the giant sprawled on the floor with a mixture of fascination and absolute silence. "I'm garbage," he suddenly cried out, hitting his own forehead against the wooden floor with force, a gesture of absolute punishment and humiliation before her. "You're absolutely right. I was a coward. I was a damned coward who was terrified of poverty, who was terrified of failing in the eyes of others, and I sacrificed you to save my own image. I hate myself. I hate myself and disgust myself every damn day of my life since I closed that door." Marcos raised his soaked face, looking at her from the deepest, darkest, most humiliating misery of his soul, without trying to hide a single tear. "Money serves no purpose for me," he continued, his voice reduced to a hoarse thread, shattered by crying. "Power serves no purpose. My life is an empty crystal palace, and I'm freezing to death every day. Today is my birthday, 35 years old, and there wasn't a single human being on this planet who cared if I was alive or dead. No one called me until I opened that door and saw them." He released the apron fabric with one hand and, trembling violently, raised a finger to point at the two children who were staring at him with their large, honey-colored eyes. "I'm not asking you to love me, Anna Maria." Marcos clasped his palms together before his chest in a literal, physical, and total plea. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know I ruined our story forever. I know you'll never look at me again as the man you loved. I'm not asking to be your husband or partner, but I implore you. I implore you on my knees, crawling like the worm I am at your feet. Don't take away my right to try, even if it's just a little, to be these children's father." Anna Maria stopped breathing. The silence in the immense mansion was total, paralyzing, interrupted only by the erratic breathing and hoarse sobs of the magnate on the floor. "Punish me," he begged, clutching her dress again with both hands, closing his eyes tightly, as if expecting a blow. "Trample me, treat me like the garbage and scum I was to you. Spit in my face if you want, but let me see them. Let me know they exist. Let me hold my children, Anna Maria, just once. I beg you, if you walk out that door and leave me in this house alone tonight, knowing that my blood is out there and hates me, I swear to God I won't see the sunrise." The vulnerability in his words was so raw, so stark and unfiltered, that Anna Maria felt her own walls of resentment begin to tremble. She knew Marcos Bellwether better than anyone in the world. She knew his monumental ego, his unbreakable pride. To see him shattered on the floor amidst cake remains, renouncing all his status, begging for his life for a chance at redemption, not as the owner of the city, but as a broken father, this was not a trick. This could not be faked. Ravi, who was leaning against his mother's chest, let out a small, innocent whimper. The blonde baby, oblivious to human failings and past sins, leaned slightly forward. He stretched out one of his chubby little arms, still stained with sweets, towards the ruined, suited man who was crying on the floor. The boy didn't understand betrayals. He didn't understand wounded pride. He only saw a sad man who was crying loudly. Anna Maria looked at her son's small hand, extended towards Marcos. Then she looked at the bloodshot eyes of the man clinging to her knees. The war that erupted inside Anna Maria's chest was catastrophic. 2 years of deep resentment, of sleepless nights, of scrubbing floors until she bled, collided head-on with the overwhelming honesty of the only man she had ever loved surrender. Slowly, her heart pounding so hard she felt it would break her ribs, Anna Maria relaxed her arms. She looked at Marcos Bellwether, the fallen giant, whose face was still soaked, waiting for her definitive sentence. "Get up," Anna Maria said. It was just a soft whisper, but in the funereal silence of the room, it echoed with the force of lightning announcing the end of the storm. Anna Maria's whisper floated in the immense living room, like a sentence suspended in the air. "Get up." Marcos Bellwether didn't move immediately. He kept his face bowed, his breath ragged. His large, powerful hands still clung to the blue fabric of the woman's uniform, who had just destroyed every one of his defenses. He was terrified to let go of her. He was terrified that if he opened his eyes and got up, he would discover that everything had been a hallucination induced by the loneliness of his damned birthday, and that Ana Maria and the twins would evaporate out the door forever. "Marcos," Ana Maria repeated, this time with a firmness that allowed no argument, though her voice remained tinged with a vulnerability she had spent 2 years trying to hide. "Let go of my apron and get up. I will not allow my children to see the man who gave them life crawling on the floor like a coward. Get up." Slowly, his fingers numb from the tension, Marcos loosened his grip, letting her go. He placed both hands on the wooden floor, right on top of the crushed remains of chocolate cake and the frosting that had ruined the Persian rug. His muscles trembled from the adrenaline crash. He pushed himself up, awkward, heavy, completely stripped of the elegance and arrogance that characterized him. When he finally managed to stand, the contrast was heartbreaking. The untouchable magnate of New York looked like a shipwreck survivor. The expensive, tailored navy suit was crumpled, stained with sweet powder and tears. His silk tie hung loose around his neck. His face was red, furrowed by uncontrollable crying, disfigured by the purest and most absolute regret a human being could experience. He stood before Ana Maria, his arms at his sides, waiting. He didn't dare take a single step towards her. He had understood the hardest lesson of his existence. Money couldn't buy the distance that separated them. Only respect could. Ana Maria looked him in the eyes. Behind the shell of coldness she had built, she saw the true Marcos for the first time. Not the calculating businessman, not Samantha Sterling's fiancé, but the frightened, vulnerable man she had loved in that unheated apartment. Ravi, the twin still held in Ana Maria's right arm, broke the overwhelming tension. The blonde boy, completely oblivious to the emotional abyss separating his parents, again stretched out his chubby little hands towards Marcos. His small fingers were covered in a sticky mixture of white meringue and chocolate. He babbled a soft, impatient sound, demanding that the giant in the ruined suit pick him up. Ana Maria lowered her gaze to her son, then raised it to Marcos. The woman's chest rose and fell in a deep, heavy breath, laden with the weight of the decision she was about to make. She knew that crossing this line changed everything. She knew that handing over her son at that moment did not erase the 21 months of abandonment. It did not erase the nights of hunger or the humiliations, but she also knew that hatred was a poison that sooner or later would end up intoxicating her own children. And Marcos Bellwether had just died before her so that a father could be born. Ana Maria took a single step forward. Marcos stopped breathing. His heart pounded against his ribs with such violence that he felt physical pain. "Listen to me very carefully. Marcos Bellwether," Ana Maria said, her voice dropping to a lethal, intimate whisper, looking directly into the millionaire's dilated pupils. "I don't forgive you. What you did to me, what you did to us, cannot be erased with a crying fit or a tantrum on the floor. You are still out of my life. You are still the man who abandoned me in the deepest darkness." Marcos nodded frantically. Tears welled up in his eyes again, streaming down his cheeks. He didn't care about the condemnation. He didn't care about the conditions. He was willing to sign any contract with his own blood if it allowed him to stay. "I know," he whispered, his voice broken. "I know, Ana Maria, I accept. I deserve it." "I'm not finished," she cut him off drastically, with a fierceness that paralyzed him. "If I give you this child today, if I allow you into their world, there's no going back. If you ever flee again, if you ever put your stupid company, your image, or your money above them, even once, I swear on my children's lives that I will disappear from this country and spend my last breath making sure you never see their faces again. Do you understand me?" The threat was not an exaggeration. It was an absolute promise, and Marcos knew it. "I swear," Marcos replied. It wasn't a corporate promise. It was an oath, made from his gut. "I swear on my life, Ana Maria. I swear I will never let them go again. I'd rather burn this empire to the ground than fail them again." Ana Maria held his gaze for another second, searching for any trace of doubt, any shadow of a lie. She found nothing. She only saw a man desperate for redemption. Slowly, Ana Maria detached Ravi from her chest, extended her arms, offering the blonde, cake-stained boy to the magnate. Marcos Bellwether raised his immense hands. They trembled with the violence of an earthquake. The man who signed 9-figure checks without blinking was terrified of dropping a 1-year-old baby. His enormous, warm palms closed around Ravi's small torso. He felt the texture of the worn denim overalls. He felt the stickiness of the vanilla frosting on his own fingers. But above all, he felt the weight, the overwhelming, perfect, and terrifying weight of his own blood. He drew Ravi to his chest instinctively. The baby didn't cry. On the contrary, feeling the warmth of the embrace, Ravi tilted his head and rested his cake-stained cheek directly against Marcos's designer white shirt, staining it completely in the process. The boy's little hands grabbed the ruined silk tie. A muffled, raw, wild sob escaped Marcos's throat. He closed his eyes tightly and buried his face in the boy's blonde, disheveled hair. It smelled of sweet vanilla, baby sweat, and pure life. It was the most intoxicating scent he had ever smelled. The iron shell that had protected Marcos's heart throughout his existence disintegrated into ashes. He hugged his son with devoted desperation, rocking him slightly, crying in silence, while guilt and love collided within him like two trains at maximum speed. From Ana Maria's other arm, Gael watched the scene. The second twin, always more hyperactive, couldn't bear to be ignored. He began to squirm in his mother's arms, babbling sharp complaints and extending his little hands towards the giant holding his brother. He wanted to be part of it. He wanted to go to the man in the suit. Ana Maria let out a trembling exhalation. A traitorous tear finally managed to escape her eyes, sliding down her tired cheek. She took one more step and, with a gentle movement, placed Gael directly into Marcos's other free arm. Marcos felt his knees give out again, but this time he didn't collapse. He stood firm, accommodating his immense arms, carrying both boys at the same time. The weight of both twins against his chest was the most overwhelming and, at the same time, the most liberating sensation of his life. He was embracing his own future. He was embracing the only wealth that truly mattered. Gael, thrilled by the new height, let out a vibrant giggle that echoed off the high walls of the mansion. He grabbed Marcos's nose with his chocolate-covered fingers and squeezed it mercilessly. Ravi, for his part, clumsily patted Marcos's wet cheek, leaving a glistening trail of meringue on the magnate's skin. Marcos couldn't help it. Despite the crying that still choked his throat, despite the pain and guilt that shattered his soul, a deep, broken, uncontrollable laugh exploded in his chest. He laughed. The most feared man in New York, the magnate who had started the day in the most miserable solitude of his crystal tower, was now in the center of his ruined living room, crying and laughing loudly, while two babies used him as a human canvas to paint with frosting. Ana Maria took a step back, observing the chaos, crossing her arms over her blue apron. She wasn't smiling. The wound was still too deep to heal in a single night, but the ice in her eyes had completely melted. There was peace. For the first time in 21 months, Ana Maria stopped feeling like she had to fight the whole world alone. Suddenly, a soft clearing of the throat at the edge of the corridor interrupted the intimacy of the moment. Marcos turned his head slightly, without letting go of the boys. There was Mr. Henderson. The old manager hadn't left. He had stayed in the shadows, watching as an empire fell, and a family was reborn. In his right hand, he held a small, polished metal lighter, and a single, half-crushed blue candle he had rescued from the cake remains on the rug. Mr. Henderson walked slowly towards them, stepping over the debris of the desert war, not caring about dirtying his polished shoes. He stopped before Marcos. His old wise eyes did not judge his employer's deplorable appearance. They only showed a deep and immense tranquility. The cleaning agency called Mr. Bellwether, Mr. Henderson said in his impeccable manager's tone. I informed them that Miss Ana Maria resigned immediately, and that if they try to charge her $1 for today's broken dishes, the Bellwether corporate attorneys will crush them into destitution first thing tomorrow. Marcos looked at the old man. Henderson's loyalty had saved him from dying of loneliness. He nodded his head, a mute confirmation, laden with a gratitude that words could not encompass. Mr. Henderson raised the crushed blue candle and lit the lighter mechanism. A small, bright, warm, flickering flame came to life in the middle of the immense, dark room. Happy birthday, young man, the old manager murmured, extending the lit candle towards him. Marcos watched the flame. The fire reflected in the large, curious eyes of Gael and Ravi, who stopped pulling his hair to watch, fascinated the small, bright light, dancing millimeters from their faces. Then, Marcos looked up at Ana Maria. She was still there. She wasn't going to run towards the door. She was waiting. The richest man in the city then understood the macabre and perfect joke fate had played on him. Samantha had been right about one thing. Marcos Belvedere had lost everything tonight. His wedding had been cancelled. His social prestige was about to go up in flames. His business partners would probably demand his head tomorrow. His immaculate mansion looked like a crime scene covered in sugar. His $1,000 suit was ready for the trash. Absolutely nothing remained of the empire he had built by trampling his own heart. And yet, as he held his two cake-stained children against his broken chest, Marcos Bellwether realized that never, in his 35 years of miserable existence, had he been so disgustingly rich. Ravi squirmed in his arms, reaching out his hands towards the flame, babbling with enthusiasm. Marcos brought his face close to the twins, brushing their cheeks. He closed his eyes for an instant. He didn't ask for the past to be erased. He didn't ask for the pain to magically disappear. His only silent and desperate wish was to have enough strength to earn the right to be in that same room a year from now. He opened his eyes, smiled with a face soaked in tears, and, along with the innocent babbling of his children, blew out the small broken candle. The room plunged into perfect silence. The storm had ended. The most destructive and brilliant birthday of his life had just begun his future. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and share. In the comments, tell us if you believe Marcos deserves a second chance. Also, tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories that go straight to the heart. A hug, and until next time, M.